Sachin is going to be talking to us about long-term vegetation monitoring at EFTEON sites, and he will tell you what that means in KwaZulu-Natal using SAEON protocols. Sachin, sorry if I'm mutilating that word. And I just want to give you a brief introduction to Sachin. He is someone who rarely passes a wildflower without stopping to admire, photograph, and identify it. Sachin joined SAEON's grassland node in 2019 as a botanical intern and has been rooted in biodiversity research ever since. From tracking woody species, sampling aquatic invertebrates, and engaging with communities, he brings a blend of scientific curiosity and heartfelt appreciation for South Africa's rich landscapes. With an ecology background and countless hours in herbaria and in the field, Sachin brings both thoughtful insight and genuine passion for plant ecology. And just briefly to go through the learning from this session, to understand the value of long-term monitoring for tracking ecosystem change and guiding conservation, recognize the impacts of woody encroachment in grassland and savanna systems, see how science communication can turn research into practical, community-driven action, and discover how citizen science tools engage communities and deliver valuable environmental data. Sachin, you're welcome to take the stage.
So hi everyone, my name is Sachin Doarsamy. I work for the EFTEON research infrastructure and I'm a biodiversity technician. I'm a botanist by heart, I love plants. And my presentation is done in two parts. I'm going to focus on the long-term vegetation monitoring done in KwaZulu-Natal, and then I'm going to jump into a bigger chunk of work I've been involved with a big social ecological component in it. So EFTEON stands for the Expanded Freshwater and Terrestrial Environmental Observation Network. It is a collection of 6 landscapes spread across Africa. There's Greater Cape Town in the Cape, there's the Garden Route, there's Kimtree, which is centered on Kimberley, there's the Northern Drakensberg landscape, there's the Puttaland coastal plain landscape, and then there's a low-felt landscape. Within EFTEON, there are 5 themes for understanding change, and that's biogeochemistry, hydrology, meteorology and atmospheric science, biodiversity, and social ecological systems. These themes aim to be implemented across all these EFTEON landscapes, and they all fit into each other to gain a better understanding of change across Africa. So the design for EFTEON is that there are 6 what we call landscapes because of their sizes, and they represent important ecosystem human complexes. Additionally, they also represent the major biomes within the country and their embedded aquatic systems. As I mentioned, that we are hosted within a SAEON facility, which is a national research facility, and then there are 2 additional research infrastructures, SMACRE and SAPRE. And within each of our EFTEON landscapes, there's often a core site centered around core instrumentation to go and document environmental change. And at these sites, there's linkages between freshwater monitoring, terrestrial observations, social data, and biodiversity data collected also at secondary sites outside our core sites. So for this part, the whole rationale is that there is an increase in woody vegetation throughout the world. It's not just a South African problem or an African problem. There's just a general increase of woody vegetation, and it's often indigenous plants, the area. And there's many factors that can lead to this process. So it's basically one shoe doesn't fit each site. So each site is specific to why there's more trees there. But often the reasons could be from an increase in CO2 levels, changes in temperature and rainfall, the use of fire in the system, and also the whole management of the land, and that affects woody encroachment. And so within South Africa, grasslands and savannas are our largest biomes, and these seem to be the most affected by woody encroachment. So at a global context or at an African context, there is predicted to be an increase in carbon stored in African woodlands. So with this change that is happening, we have to be able to quantify this change. So EFTEON aims to quantify changes using long-term monitoring tools within a instrumented landscape. So the tool that we implemented has been implemented in 3 landscapes right now, which is the Kimberley landscape, the Northern Drakensberg landscape, and the Maputaland coastal landscape. Is called CSO. It's the Social Ecological Observatory for Southern African Woodlands. CSO has a long-term goal to understand the response of African woodlands to global change, and it's comprised of a network of scientists that have contributed their work towards CSO and have a large network of vegetation plots across southern and eastern Africa, unified by a shared interest in the changing of social ecology of African woodlands, savannas, or dry forests. So CSO, some of the key outputs from CSO is that it's often novel analyses of ecosystem structure and function. They have standardized methods for plot design and measurement for African woodlands. And a lot of these protocols can be turned into long-term plans for plot remeasurements. So the protocol that CSO uses comes from existing methods already. They've been proven and tried, and they work well in the field, and they go and generate good data. Additionally, with CSO all the protocols are living documents, so they can be easily modified or added according to your landscape, your site, or to your question. And they can be compatible with other regional networks, such as EFTEON. And the SAEON site is very much a user-friendly site. They have thought about the protocols, but they've also included stuff like data sheets. So start me off like, what should go in your data sheet? What sort of field resources would you need? And you can even contact the CSO scientist, and they can have a one-on-one chat with you to adapt the protocol data sheets for your site and for your questions. And for us, using CSO would seem quite ideal because they cover a large range of protocols that can be turned into long-term monitoring tools. So in this image over here, on the top left-hand side corner is South Africa, and all the red dots represent all the EFTEON landscapes. The bigger picture of Africa represents which is the typical CSO region for working. Within South Africa, there are only 5 permanent plots. But because South Africa is going through such rapid change in terms of woody encroachment, we found the CSO protocol to work in the reverse, because in this green area, these are all woodlands, and specifically in like mainland Africa, they're all Miombo woodlands. So we are seeing the reverse what's happening from our grasslands, savannas changing into a woody system. So we started on the reverse, documenting the stages from the beginning to see what's going to happen in 10 years from now. So, excuse me. So for the woody vegetation protocol, we had 3 objectives: quantify long-term changes, understand the relationships between growth, mortality, and productivity, use these relationships to understand changes and relate back to climate change. So for the sampling, there are several designs that can be used. We chose to go with the 1 hectare plot, which is ideal for long-term monitoring. And before you can start any of the work, you have to do a lot of preliminary site visits, get your questions in order, because having your research question, the trees you want to target, why you want to target them, influences how you're going to measure the trees, where you're going to measure the trees. And because it's going to be a permanent plot, you also know what you're going to exclude out from the site. So for the herbaceous layer, which is your grassy and forb layer, we use the global grassy group, also called GGG, which aims to characterize ground layer plant functionality and taxonomic composition, which is species richness and frequency. And these plots can be turned into permanent plots for repeat measurements. And whenever we did stuff with this protocol for the herbaceous stuff, we took good voucher specimens from outside our plot, and we also took photos for INET. So the designs can be quite varied, and it can be implemented to suit your question or your landscape or your site. So for us, we went with the middle, which is B, which is 1 hectare plot, which is 100 by 100, and that's divided into 4 quadrats. And within each quadrat, there are 21 permanent herbaceous sampling plots. So as I mentioned, that a lot of our core sites monitoring has to fall within other instrument monitoring sites. So at the center of EFTEON's monitoring and SAEON monitoring, often there's a eddy covariance tower, which is just a fancy bit of equipment that costs a lot of money, but it tells you the exchanges between carbon dioxide and water vapor at a specific site, at a specific biome. So it tells you how much of water vapor is released, absorbed, and same with the carbon. So within the footprint, of the EC tower, it's often greater than 1 hectare. So we have decided to expand the sampling design to reflect the full capability of the EC tower. So as in this photo here, we have a central EC tower in the central plot, which is 100 meters by 100 meters. Then we add an additional 4 1 hectare plots in the cardinal directions. And within each of these 5 plots, we tagged every tree that fits with it, that can meet the threshold. And the same thing was applied for the herbaceous plots. They all had 85 permanent plots within each of the 1 hectare plots. So there was a considerable amount of time spent doing this work, but it led to really good baseline data that we could use. So these are 2 sites within KZN. It's the Northern Drakensberg landscape at Spienkar Nature Reserve and the Maputland Coastal Plain, which I'll call MCP at Lake Sabaya. Both are grassy systems. One is coastal, one's inland. One at Spienkar, it's a grassland with significant woody encroachment. And at MCP, it's a communal rangeland. Spienkar is protected while MCP is under tribal authority. Spienkar has a history of disturbances and past indigenous people and war. Lake Sabaya, or MCP, has a decreasing groundwater table, which is affecting all the vegetation around it. They both have grazing presence. Spienkar has large herds of big herbivores, and there's significant livestock grazing at the MCP landscape. They both have a complex fire system. It's not always for Spienkar, it's typically a 2-year return interval, but sometimes it's longer, and also depends on the rainfall in that spring. Well, for the MCP landscape, it can happen at any time of the year. And at Spienkar, the reserve is funded by commercial agriculture, and in MCP within our site, there's significant resource harvesting. So this is a graphic, so you can see where we are actually in the landscape. Excuse me. It's showing the Northern Drakensberg landscape and the Maputland coastal landscape. We're now zooming in into the Northern Drakensberg landscape, which has 2 major dams. There's a strong influence of conservation, agriculture, and communal living. It's now going to zoom into our CSO plot at Spienkar. You can see the significant encroachment around it. It's now moving to the Maputland coastal plain. Here you can see significant disturbances, but also you note Lake Sabaya, which is South Africa's largest and deepest freshwater lake, and our CSO site is on the banks of the lake. Just going to move forward on this. So these are just some of the outcomes that we got from the woody outcomes. I mean, so these are some of the outcomes from Spienkar for the woody plants. So the site is dominated by true acacia trees, and we sampled just over 1,000 trees sampled, and we tagged nearly under 1,900 tags. It was dominated by acacia crew, which is a known encroacher, but there was also significant acacia nilotica and cebriana. They often came out in really good age groups. So we understand that, especially for acacia crew, this is very much a recent encroachment in the landscape, while for nilotica seems to be present because there's significant older trees here. In total, there was only 13 trees present in our plot. And so this is where it gets quite interesting. So we have a CSO protocol, but you can add stuff to it and modify it for your site. So what we did was we modified how we measure the trees. Since acacia is often with browsing or fire, it forms multiple stems that can range between 3 to 8 stems. And because we didn't want to lose that data, we often measured at the base of the trees, with the base of each of the stems, so we can still track the growth over time. We also recorded the number of stems, but also what was quite significant in this specific site that there was significant insect damage for the tree. So stem borers, such as longhorn beetles or for jewel beetles, they often kill off large branches of a tree. So for that, we just created a scale of damage, and we plan to have a resample in the next 3 to 5 years. Last year was our first fire at the site. So we did a pre-fire assessment where we looked at if like any of the trees had died, how the tags were doing, and so forth. And we like encountered an issue with the acacia crew because acacia crew has such a good response to being to a stem borer laying an egg or like a larval form moving to the stem, then it clogs up the stem with sap so quickly. So for example, if I tagged a tag in the morning, by the afternoon I walk past the stem tree, it's already enclosed by sap. So over the months, the tree pushed out tags. Luckily, the tag just fell straight to the ground again, and we can put it back quite easily. But that was just the tree's response to the tags. So for our GGG plot data, which we completed this year, we have just approximately like 250 species. So it is quite species rich, and we're still processing the data right now. So this is steps for the data processing. So we have voucher specimens for all 250 species that we collected outside our sampling point. And the plan is that we are slowly working through to get the correct names each of the species. So how we do it is that we have all the samples with us. We use our field guides, our online resources, revisions, and so forth to get the best possible name for the species. Then everything goes to be verified at a herbarium, where we can either cross-reference it against a type specimen or also just look at what the herbarium has to offer, because often they have a good collection of range of species for a particular genus. So now I'm moving on to the MCP landscape, which is at Lake Sabaya. So this landscape is dominated by 3 woody plants: a Dicostachys, a Sidrax, a Strychnos, and a palm hyphene. In this landscape, it wasn't very tree dense, because so the plot was chosen because it's an intermediate zone. Surrounding the landscape is quite wooded and quite encroached already. So this is a good baseline area for us to start off with. So we only had 342 measurable trees. Also, because the landscape is not protected, we did not tag any of the trees. We also felt like the tag might make the trees more obvious. And I know if I was a kid, I would want to collect those tags because I wouldn't know any better. So what we did for this landscape is that we went and created a grid design in each of the 1 hectare plots. And it was a 10 by 20 meter block. And we walked each of them from north to south, recording as we went along. So one of the major things that we encountered was that there was significant Dicostachys juvenile plants in most of our plots. So we added that to the list, just counts. So we walked and we counted every single Dicostachys, and it was over 2,000 plants. But it's also good data because we have it for each and every block. And also each of the trees, we GPSed it. So hopefully when we come back, they will be there, but we also did like XY coordinates of them within each block, so we can know if it has been removed, burnt out, or taken out. And we plan to do the herbaceous work, which is all the grasses and forbs in this year January, which will be peak flowering and production for the system. An interesting note that we added to the project while we started was the palm wine production. So palm wine production is a big commodity in this part of South Africa, and there's been an increase in production and value of it. It's mainly done by 2 palms, hyphene, which is the dominant palm, and phoenix. The main question around was the harvesting was how it gets harvested. How it gets harvested. So The felt often has to be burnt to clear out, so it's easier to work in the area. Then around the palm trees, there's further disturbance of digging and clearing out, so it can be tapped easily. What we noted was that palm trees, they were often served as nurse plants for other shrubs, and especially with trees. And the whole process of them burning, and because the burning can happen at any time of the year, is a significant disturbance. And clearing out the area around the palm trees creates a whole different disturbance and change in the landscape. And this has been happening repeatedly over, I don't know for how long, but according to our surveys and according to our plot where we are, like our plot was once harvested probably a decade ago, and now it's been allowed to regrow, and it'll probably be harvested again when the time is right. So basically how we incorporated the palms into the monitoring was we counted the number of heads, whether it was previously harvested or not, the height of the palm trees, and whether the plants are flowering or fruiting. So now I'm going to move on to my social component of the study. It was funded through the Water Research Commission. It was a collaborative work between the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the Center of Water Resources Research, SAEON, EFTEON, and Mashatini Development Foundation. So for this talk, it's to be on the mapping of ecosystem health and functioning in vulnerable Northern Drakensberg communities. So the title of the report was Building Social Agency and Local Capacity for Sustainable and Equitable Community Resource Management, a framework for co-learning, adaptive planning, participatory mapping of land uses and ecosystem services. So the project background, it takes place in smallholder communities that are found just outside Cathedral Peak Nature Reserve, which is in the Maluti Drakensberg in the Northern Berg. And the goal was to implement sustainable strategies with these smallholder communities. And the only way to do this correctly was always to have good support from the community, which often leads to long-lasting impacts in those communities. Because we didn't want this project to be something that we start and we leave, and then it all falls down or falls away. So we worked in 2 agricultural communities, Costone and Izimbovini. We have created a water research management plan according to their needs and also what we saw from the work. And this work was only done possible through a transdisciplinary approach where we had people from different aspects of science coming together for a common goal. So I worked on 2 of the aims for the report. The first one was to survey ecosystem health and functioning, and the second one was to develop a transdisciplinary social ecological support GIS support tool. So for the ecosystem health and function, we did landscape mapping, felt assessment, and water quality testing. So for the landscape map, so this is the Izimbovini community represented here. This map represents all the woody vegetation communities within this community, and it highlights the invasive plants and also the indigenous communities and also where they may be found. For the file condition assessment, we often, so we started off doing site visits to see whether the site was homogeneous or heterogeneous, and then we decided to use the step point method. We also included a 1 by 1 meter quadrat just to understand grass cover. And then we put all the grasses into a ecological status, a decreaser or increaser, and we used the ecological score method to give us an idea of the score for both communities. We also use a dispartimeter just to give us an idea of the biomass for the communities. So these are just some of the file condition assessment outcomes. We're quite quick. The main thing to note is that there was either no decreases or just limited decreases represented in both communities. There was a high percentage of increaser 2C, and this swayed the data, but also in the end, it just showed that both communities have moderately degraded systems. And in these communities, communal rangelands is a shared resource, and anyone can have open use to it. It's continuous grazing. There's no restrictions onto anything. But in these communities, there's a loss of palatable species. but also there's a dominance of an exotic grass, Paspianum notatum, which covers the landscape in large swathes. It often forms really strong, tight mats on the ground, which is good for soil erosion and for containing soil, but really bad for allowing any other grass species to come and infiltrate. So the third point from aim 2 was a citizen science water quality test. So while doing all the mapping and the felt assessments, we thought it'd be important to also look at the quality of water, either from springs, where the majority of people collect water from, or from rivers. So we did a round of preliminary tests. We're using a very simple citizen science E. coli test kit. It's a test kit that has an activator inside it, and you just pour in a predetermined amount of water that you want to test. This goes into a wonder bag, and after 48 hours, you get a result whether it's positive or negative for E. coli or for like any other coliform bacteria in the water. So it gives you a very quick idea of whether your water is safe to drink, and the higher concentration of E. coli, the quicker it's going to turn as an indicator of green or bluish, depending on how you see the colors. So we noted that there was significant E. coli present in springs, and these springs feed multiple communities, households. So we started like a monitoring program with the community, so they know how safe their own water is to drink. So we had a whole bunch of training workshops, hand over tests and wonder bags where people could, on a weekly basis, test their water, where it comes from, and see whether it's in a good or in a bad state. So like right now, we had all this data that we collected, from the maps, from the felt assessments to the E. coli testing, but we needed community input. So we did a series of co-learning workshops where we presented our work, excuse me, where we presented our work, our maps, and we presented like rainfall data showing that there has been a decrease in rainfall and an increase in temperature. It was a good opportunity to say what we got right and also what we got wrong, and also what we could add to the maps. We also had a really good veld condition learning workshop where I brought in grasses that would typically occur in this veld but are no longer present, and I explained like what they look like, what they mean in terms of palatability towards cattle. So it was a good learning workshop where we could easily express the work that we did, get good feedback, and modify our work from the feedback from the community. So moving on to aim 3, this was done in conjunction with a master student, and we did a series of participatory maps. So we like printed out large-scale maps, had several community meetings where people could tell me stuff that I missed off a map. So stuff like religious areas, harvesting sites, where you'll get face clay from, or different types of face clay, where there was spiritual sites, stuff that I wouldn't have normally seen or seen from Google Earth or also seen on the ground. Then there were village walks to point out areas of importance or of significance. So we combined all this data with the maps I had created, and we created a GIS support tool that could have everything available to the community. It could tell you where the water was, where a spring was, and this we handed over to all the key people in the community. So they were like key leaders. Like it could tell them for the future where they could plan to do something, where they could tap into a new spring, where they would see there was significant erosion and something could be done, or also how to control alien plants that they wanted to spread further, and also where to find them. So this was the end product of one of them. This shows all the vegetation communities at Izimbovini. This shows all the erosion and sites where there was prominent brick making or sand collection. So lastly, for the project, it created good foundation information that we use as a building block for future work and for future research topics. There was good recommendations that were put forward and that was given to the community, and it had to be their involvement of how they wish to act on recommendations, or also how it could be modified. The cool thing was that on their own, each community they knew that there was alien invasive plants. They knew that erosion was significant. They knew that the erosion was impacting their whole their quantity and quality of water. And this sort of integrated approach to understand the work that we did resulted in good feedback from the community. We're able to get good feedback on rangeland management and put forward that something has to change, whether it's a small step or a big step. And it was cool because like these maps, they triggered alien plant removal, soil erosion initiatives, and water management. And like for the first time last year, they went and implemented fire breaks around the communities and around their own grazing land. So at least the felt can be rested. But it's good steps going forward. And even though the project has finished off, but we're still present in the landscape and we're still expanding all this work into 5 more communities in the greater Northern Drakensberg. So thank you so much. Thank you for Tony and for Peter for your wonderful first talks. This is the end of my talk, but these are the people I've worked with throughout the time. There's also the websites for Mashatini Development Foundation, which was key for all the community work, or EFTEON site, the CSO site, and the GGG site. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sachin. That was absolutely wonderful, incredibly informative, and really great to hear about the integration with communities. I just want to say thank you so much for sticking it out. I know that you're not feeling well, and I wish you a very rapid recovery. But it was a fantastic talk and very visual as well. I see that there's been quite a lively chat going on. Tony has been answering quite a few questions in the chat. And I just want to ask whether anybody wants to raise their virtual hand in the audience for Sachin to answer their question directly. I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet. Okay, wonderful. And thank you so much for sticking it out. And yeah, I really do wish you better. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience. It's been a really super 2-day workshop, and I hope you got as much out of it as I did. So thank you very much and have a great rest of your afternoon.